Hello, and welcome to Office Hours with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan. Today's video is on dropping a class, and quite simply, dropping a class is officially removing a class from your schedule prior to the end of the semester. I did drop a few classes within my time as a student, both as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. Undergrad, I made the mistake of signing up for a tech elective called Geometric Optics. Professor who taught the class was an amazing professor. I was just in way over my head. I was a civil engineering student in with a bunch of physics majors, taking a class all about lenses and lasers and such. And it was blatantly obvious early on that there was no way that I was going to be able to do well in that class, so I dropped that class. Unfortunately, I dropped it late enough in the term that I wasn't able to go and add another class that same term. So to keep my graduation plan on track, I had to go to a crosstown school the following semester and add another class, Introduction to Oceanography, which turned out to be a good class, a lot of nice things to learn in that class. The professor there was good, so things worked out. That's not always the case when you drop a class, which is what I'm going to go into in a little bit here. In my PhD program, there was a semester where I ended up dropping 2 classes and just keeping one for the semester because I was working for myself and business got very busy during that time, and it was a matter of, well, do I keep on taking these classes and graduate when I thought I was going to graduate, or do I not take these classes? Do I drop them and basically take care of business? And when you know that you're the one paying the mortgage and the bills and the car note, taking the jobs is going to be more important than graduating at a specific time. So that was a really easy decision for me, especially since things got so busy early in the semester. I was able to drop and still get my money back, so it was kind of a no harm, no foul kind of thing. So I have been there on the thing of dropping classes. So some things to think about, before you actually go through with dropping a class. And the number one reason that people drop a class is to salvage their GPA. My graduate classes that I dropped were for business reasons, but by and large, most people drop a class because they feel like, okay, there's no way I'm going to do well in this class. It's going to kill my GPA. I better get out of here. And that's fine. Things happen. Some things to know, dropping a class can be good for your GPA, but it can be bad for your graduation date. Meaning, are you going to be able to still graduate on time if you drop this class? What is a passing grade at your school? I mean, some schools, a D, while that's not a great grade, a D is a passing grade, meaning that if you get a D or better in the class, that you've considered to have passed it. That means you don't have to take it again. That means that if the class you got a D in is a prerequisite for another class, you can take that follow-on class. Whereas some schools, a D is, while it may be a quote-unquote passing grade, it's not a grade that is going to allow you to take the follow-on classes. You have to retake that class. So know what is a passing grade at your school. A few D's, if D's are passing grades, a few D's in your overall college career is not going to kill your cumulative GPA. And that's, the GPA that includes all of the classes that you've taken, not your term GPA, which is just for that specific semester. So your term GPA, if you have a D in it, is going to take a hit, and that's just the way it goes. But your cumulative GPA, the farther along you are in school, the harder it is to skew your cumulative GPA one way or the other. For example, my term GPAs ranged from 2.2 to 3.91, but my cumulative GPA only ranged from 2.8 to 3.17. So your cumulative GPA becomes a lot harder to move up or move down the farther you are along in your college career. In fact, I did get a D plus. The school I went to in undergrad had plus grade, so I did get a D plus in my final term senior year. It was in organic chemistry, intro to organic chemistry, basically organic chemistry for non-chemistry majors. probably would have been a better idea for me to take something other than that, but that's the way it goes. So it didn't, a couple of D's is not going to kill you. If you're getting those couple of D's your first 1 or 2 semesters in college, that's going to hurt a lot more than if you get them in your last 1 or 2 semesters. Also, if you're going to get if a D is a passing grade and you get a D, you may be able to do grade replacement. Some schools have grade replacement where it's basically you retake the class, and then some schools will replace the lower grade with the higher grade. Hopefully you get a higher grade the second time you take the class. Still other schools will include both on your transcript and in your GPA calculation. So, I can't be real specific in a lot of these videos because it just depends on what your school does. Different schools have different procedures, different things that work for them. So really, before you drop a class, make sure you know everything about your school's procedures for dropping classes, for replacing grades, what constitutes a passing grade and what does not constitute a passing grade. To the heart of the question, if you cannot pass the class, if it is mathematically impossible for you to pass the class, then it is probably a good idea to drop the class if you are still able to. And by still able to, there are usually dates within a semester that after a certain date you can't drop the class. You're going to get a grade for that class. So make sure that if you can still drop the class, just make sure that you really can't pass the class. Talk to your professors. You may be like, well, wait, geez, I have a 50% average. That's just, horrendous. I'm not going to be able to pass the class. Well, maybe the top percentage in the class is 60%. Maybe that's just the way things are. So your 50% may actually be a decent grade for that class. So just again, find out from your professor what's going on. Go to them during office hours and just matter-of-factly explain what's going on and you're concerned and could you still pass the class, what's going on, and just have a frank discussion. What are the odds of passing the class? If you can't, if 50% is 50% and there's no way you can bring that up, then your decision's pretty well made for you. If you're dropping a class that you're going to have to go and take later, even if it's with a different professor, then consider still going to lectures if you're allowed to go to lectures after you've dropped a class, just so that you're getting a feel for the material and you're going to know more what's coming up the next time you take the class. So that's something to consider. The time that you're going to save by dropping the class, because even if you continue to go to the lectures after you've dropped the class, you're still going to have the time that you would have had to spend doing homework and studying for tests. Make sure you put that time in on other classes, not just out playing Xbox or surfing the internet. So you're getting some time back. Use that to your advantage. So then it comes to, can you still drop the class? If you're past the date when you can drop the class, the decision's made for you. If you still have the time to drop the class, then you have to look at, the later you are in the semester, the more likely it is that you're going to, the more unlikely it is that you're going to be able to drop the class, because schools have different dates. If you drop the class after a certain point, you may still get a grade for the class. You may get a WF or an F. So they may let you drop the class, but they may say, well, you withdrew failing or you withdrew passing. Different things depending on what your school is. Know what's going on. If you're past the drop dead date where you can't drop the class, then get in there and still try. However, if you've talked with your professor and there's just no way that you can pass the class, then you have to look at, well, what is the best use for your time? Is it even worth going to the lectures? If it's a class that you're not going to take again, if it's a tech elective or some kind of elective class that you don't have to take again, and there's no way that you're ever going to take that class again, then if you're going to fail, then stop going and use the time to your advantage in other classes. Again, make sure that there's no way you can pass the class. Again, talk with the professor and find out what's going on, what your options are. Don't expect the professor to give you special treatment just based on the fact that, if I don't pass this class, I'm going to lose my scholarship. Well, odds are that just because you did poorly in that one professor's class isn't why you're going to lose your scholarship. It's because you've done poorly in other classes. So be honest about what's going on. You're an adult. Colleges with adults, be honest with what's going on. Explain to the professor why you're asking the question. Can you pass the class so you can make some informed decisions? Once you get past a certain add-drop date in the school schedule, the odds of you being able to get any kind of money back for dropping the class goes away, and that usually happens pretty early in the semester, within the first couple of weeks. If you drop a class after that point, you may still be able to drop it and not get a grade, but you're not going to get much, if any, of your money back. So just keep that in mind. Better to drop the class early than later. One thing to consider: if you drop that class, are you going to go from a full-time student to a part-time student? And is that going to be a big deal as far as your scholarships or your financial aid, health insurance from your parents or whoever you may have health insurance from? If you're a foreign student, is going below full-time status going to affect your visa status? So there's a lot of other things just than saving your GPA that you need to be concerned about when you drop that class. So you may need to go with check with your advisor, with the registrar, with school officials. Again, if you're a foreign student, there's usually some kind of administration on campus dealing with foreign students, because there's all the laws that deal with that the average professor isn't going to know. So again, make sure you're fully aware of everything that's going to happen just because you drop that class if it takes you below full-time students. Is your class a prerequisite or a co-requisite? So if you're a class that you're wanting to drop is a prerequisite for another class, you drop that class, you're not going to be able to take the follow-on class. If the class is a co-requisite, are they going to make you drop the other class as well? So dropping one class may affect you in other classes. And things to consider: don't be afraid to ask for an exemption or a waiver. Meaning, if you drop a class and it's a prereq for another class, most schools have some procedure in place to give a waiver. Now, the answer to the waiver may be no. I know when I switched from electrical engineering to civil engineering, I had to take several classes out of sequence. Surveying 2 before surveying 1, mechanics and materials before statics. I went to a fairly small school. I think there were 20 some odd civil engineering majors in my class, so you get to know the professors. They were okay with that. It wasn't that big a deal. You go to bigger schools, they're a little more entrenched in their rules, yet, again, with my master's at U of H, there were some classes I wanted to take as opposed to what was in the degree plan, and I asked to swap things out, and things went my way most of the time. They don't always go your way. The answer to the question might be no. Is dropping the class going to affect your graduation date? If you're dropping a required class, and a required class is one of the classes listed on your degree plan that you have to take to get that degree. If you're required to take Calculus 1, 2, and 3, and you drop Calculus 1, well, now you're going to have to go back and take Calculus 1, and then that's going to push Calc 2 and 3 to later on in your degree plan. That can be a problem. If it's junior or senior year and you're dropping a required class and that class is only offered once a year, because if you go to a smaller school, those classes may only be offered once a year. When I taught soil mechanics, geotechnical engineering at Prairie View, we only offer that class once a year. Texas A&M, down the road, a much bigger school, offered the class twice during each fall and spring semester and once over the summer. So they had 5 opportunities to take that class in the year as opposed to once in the year at Prairie View. So really look at, if you're dropping a required class, that could really stretch out your graduation date, maybe not by a semester, maybe by a whole year. So keep that in mind. The earlier it is in your college career when you drop a class, the opportunity to take the class another semester, maybe take a class in summer school, whether it's at your school or someplace else, and transfer it back. If you're going to try to transfer credit back, you need to get that approved up ahead of time so that there's a guarantee that they're going to accept that class. So if you go and take the class in the summer and then try to transfer it back after you've taken it, maybe they'll take it, maybe they won't, they being your school. If you get it approved ahead of time and save the paperwork and come back and get the minimum grade, and it's usually C or better, then you should be okay if you've gotten it approved ahead of time. And your school may just transfer the credit, they may transfer the credit and the grade. So some schools just transfer credit, and it's like, okay, you've taken Econ 1 at summer school someplace else, check, that covers our requirement. Other schools are like, okay, you've taken Econ 1, you got a B, we're going to take the credit and the grade. So just know what you're getting into before you try to transfer. And just think, well, if I have to take an extra semester, that's not the end of the world. And in reality, it may not be. It isn't the end of the world, but that could be a lot of money, because not only are you paying the tuition for that class, but then you have living expenses. If you're living at home, again, not a big deal, but if you have to pay rent on an apartment, if you have to go buy food, and then there's always the cost of you're not out there potentially earning full-time pay because you don't have your degree. Maybe you've got a part-time job, but taking an extra semester, an extra year can add a bunch of money to your student loan debt, or you're just spending money when you could be making money. Do you need permission to drop the class? I mean, yes, it's college, and yes, you're an adult, but does your department require, or your university require, permission to drop the class? And there's a difference between someone after giving you permission and then someone just signing a form acknowledging that you've seen them or talked with them about dropping the class. So permission versus acknowledgement, different thing, but do you require permission? And if it is, who is it from? Do you have to get permission from the professor or your advisor, the department head? If you're an ROTC or something like that, do you have to get permission from your commanding officer? And if you have to get permission from somebody, you need to have the plan of how you're going to address the results of dropping this class. If it's an elective, it's like, okay, I'm dropping it this semester, but next semester I can overload and take this and be good, or I'm planning on taking the class in the following semester or over summer school. In my case, when I dropped the class in undergrad and had to pick up another tech elective, I went to a crosstown school the following semester and again picked up the Intro to Oceanography. So I went to my commander with a plan of, yes sir, I'm dropping this class. Flat out told him the honest truth was that I am in way over my head. I was taking this class because the professor was great. I'm in with a bunch of physics majors. It was not a smart move on my part. Here's what I have worked out to be able to meet my requirements. And knowing that you have a plan, then people are more willing to sign off. If you go into them, it's like, I have no idea how I'm going to get around the obstacles that dropping this class creates, then there's going to be more of a problem. Again, if you need to tell your parents or an employer that you're dropping class, why are you dropping class? Is it you're in over your head? Is it you thought this was going to count towards graduation, but it's not? It's just, know why you're dropping the class if someone's going to ask you that question. And then make sure you keep a copy of the paperwork and the emails, or however your school handles this drop procedure, so that if something comes up later in the semester, it's like they still have you listed in the course and it becomes past the drop dead date and you haven't been going to class for a week because you thought you dropped it. You need to make sure that you have your proof, and it's like, hey, here's the paperwork that says I dropped the class, is with everyone's signature. Here's the email that says the class was dropped, because sometimes people make mistakes. And if you don't have the paperwork to back up that you got your approvals done and you did everything you were supposed to do to drop that class, you could find yourself with an F on your transcript and no way to fight that, particularly at bigger schools. I mean, the bigger the school, you tend to become more of a number. That's just the way it is. If you're at a smaller school, then someone may say, like, oh yeah, I remember talking to you about dropping, and I remember signing the form. So you'd have those people could go to bat for you and say, here's this, and maybe the paperwork got lost at the registrar's office or something. But save a copy of your paperwork or the emails. And once you've dropped the class and confirm that it's dropped, whether through the registrar or the student portal, it's a time to take a look and it's like, why did I have to drop this class? It's time for some honest reflection, not blaming someone else, even if someone else is to blame, so that you don't have to drop a class again. I mean, did you have too many hours at work? Did your boss say they were only going to schedule you for 15 or 20 hours a week and they ended up scheduling you for 30? Obviously it's easy for me to say, well, maybe it's time to go find another job, because maybe it's not easy to go find another job. So you have to look at that and plan in your schedule. It's like maybe you only planned on working 20 hours a week, but if you're going to be stuck working 30 hours a week and you need that job to pay the bills, then you need to plan your schooling around that. Do you have too many extracurricular activities? I mean, extracurricular activities are an important part of school, but if they start cutting into your performance, your grades, and granted, I'll talk about this in another video, you don't need a 4.0 to graduate and have a successful career, but if you're coming out with a 2.0, life is not going to be as easy, particularly if the economy is shaky when you get out. So it's a balance of your grades versus your extracurricular activities. Are you living in a disruptive environment? Do you have rude or annoying roommates that when you're trying to study, they're blasting music or they're playing Xbox, or it's just you're in an apartment complex with really thin walls and you just can't do that? So do you need to plan on studying someplace other than where you live? Were there family or health issues? So if there's someone gets sick and you're helping care for them, or someone's passed away, or you have some health issues, well, once those issues are resolved, then that's taken care of it. But if they're going to be ongoing issues, then how do you work dealing with those issues into your school schedule? Lack of self-motivation. There's a lot of distractions out there that are more enjoyable than doing homework and studying for a test. I mean, in reality, what's not more enjoyable than homework and studying for a test? Maybe root canal or something like that. So there's always something to do that's more fun than homework and studying for tests and things like that. But you have to make the time to do that. I would not want to be a full-time student nowadays. When I went through undergrad in the late 80s, early 90s, there really wasn't the internet. You didn't have all the TV options that there are now. In fact, for the 4 years I was in school, I basically didn't watch TV. There were 2 TVs in the whole dorm. It was a 4-story dorm. There were 2 TVs, and only one of the TVs was reserved for the upperclassmen during my freshman year. And so there you got 3 floors of people trying to use one TV. It just didn't work. So I realize you all have a lot of distractions, and some of it you're just going to have to work through those if you have distractions that are keeping you from getting your work done. And I talk about some of that in a later video. And one thing to keep in mind, dropping a class is not the end of the world. It's never been an issue when I've been out interviewing for jobs or someone's gotten their hands on my transcripts. It's like, well, why did you drop this class, or have you dropped classes? It's going to be a hit to your GPA potentially when if you can't drop the class and you have to take that D or an F. But again, I have a couple of D's on my undergraduate transcript, and no one's ever asked about them. So once you get through school, things get a little more mellow, and I've got yet another video where I talk about grades. And spoiler alert, the grades are important for your first few jobs after graduation, and then after that it's really about what have you done while you're out as someone working in your field. So you can still survive dropping a class. You don't want to drop a lot of them. So just think about everything that the steps that you have to worry about to drop that class, and then what are the other things that can happen because you drop a class, and is that going to be a problem? So hopefully this has helped, and take care until next time.